work, and death balance. A strange but real concept. Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night, your phone light blinking, and your mind still trapped at your desk? And in that quiet moment, did you ever wonder, am I really living or just surviving to work? In today's world, we hear a lot about work-life balance, as if the perfect recipe of enough sleep, morning coffee, and a vacation once a year could keep everything in check. But there's something we rarely dare to face. What if the scale doesn't just tip toward work, but begins to edge dangerously close to death? Sounds dramatic, I know, but think about it. How many people do you know who've burned themselves out for a job, working day and night, skipping meals, ignoring rest, just to meet deadlines, to keep their positions, to not fall behind? And then, one day, their heart stops, mid-email. Death in the workplace isn't always an accident. Sometimes it's the slow erosion of someone's spirit. It's the fatigue that piles up day after day, the silence that no one checks in on. It's showing up to work, but being empty inside. And then there are places in this world, real places, where that thin line between labor and death isn't just symbolic, it's literal. Places where stepping into work means stepping into danger, where people go in out of duty, obligation, or fear, but not everyone comes back alive. There are also places that choose death as a shield, erecting it like a wall to protect what little piece they still have left from being consumed by the machinery of the modern world. And then there's another kind, places where work doesn't kill your body, but strips away your name, your voice, your soul. A quiet kind of death, one that walks among us wearing a tie. So yes, work-death balance might sound absurd, but in this era where we trade freedom for salaries and feelings for roles, it's more accurate than we'd like to admit. And to truly understand it, we're going to visit 3 of the most forbidden places on Earth. Not because they're locked with keys, but because what lies behind them isn't just truth, it's a warning. Brace yourself.
2. Radiation symbol. 1. Chernobyl exclusion zone, where work planted the seeds of death. So, if we're going to talk about the dangerous dance between work and death, there's no place more fitting to begin than Chernobyl. It was April 26, 1986, a date that, to most of the world, reads like a line in a history book. But for those who were there, it marked the moment when work became sacrifice and duty became a death sentence. That night, inside reactor number 4 of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, a test was being conducted. A test designed to make things safer, more efficient, a procedure that, ironically, aimed to prevent catastrophe. But something went wrong, terribly wrong. Within seconds, the reactor exploded. A plume of radioactive smoke clawed into the night sky, and within hours, it would spread across countries. But the first to suffer weren't the distant towns. It was the workers, the firemen, the technicians, the engineers who, without hesitation, ran toward the glowing inferno, not knowing they were breathing in their own deaths. You see, they weren't told the truth. Many didn't even know what radiation poisoning was. They thought they were fighting a regular fire. Some even went in without protective gear, just their uniforms, helmets, and the belief that this was simply their job. And that's where it gets haunting. Because when does a job stop being a job? When does it become something else entirely? Something that consumes you? In the hours that followed, dozens of men collapsed. Some vomited, others bled from their eyes, from their gums. Their skin burned from the inside out. And yet many kept working, fixing valves, turning knobs, trying to contain the uncontainable, trying to save a city from a monster no one could see. That's the thing about radiation. It's invisible, silent. It doesn't knock on your door. It seeps in while you're doing your duty, while you're showing up, while you're being a good worker. And now, nearly 40 years later, the Chernobyl exclusion zone remains a ghost land, a 30-kilometer radius frozen in time. Nature has crept back in, reclaiming the ruins, but the shadows of those who worked here, who died here, are still present. In the cracked walls, the empty schools, the half-finished meals left behind by evacuees who never returned. Tourists can visit parts of it now, yes. There are guides, photo ops, even souvenirs. But they don't show you the truth. The truth is this: Chernobyl isn't just a nuclear disaster site. It's a mirror reflecting what happens when human ambition outruns human caution, when workers are asked to give everything and are told nothing, when the system fails and the people inside it pay the price. Back in part 1, we asked the question, is your job worth your life? Chernobyl answers it, loud and clear, with silence. This was a place where people didn't clock out. They were buried by their work, sometimes literally in lead-lined coffins because their bodies were too radioactive to cremate. And what's worse, some of them volunteered, not because they didn't fear death, but because they believed their work mattered. And maybe it did. But ask yourself, in a world like this, where workers become martyrs, where doing your job means walking straight into hell, what does balance even mean anymore? We carry Chernobyl not just in history books, but in our bones. It changed how we think about science, about risk, about responsibility. And deep down, it reminds us, sometimes the most dangerous thing isn't failure, it's obedience.
3. North Sentinel Island, where death protects life. If Chernobyl was a monument to human ambition gone wrong, then North Sentinel Island is its opposite, a stubborn refusal to be part of that ambition at all. Nestled in the turquoise waters of the Bay of Bengal, this tiny forested island looks like paradise, but don't let the postcard image fool you. No tourist boat drops anchor here. No scientist sets up camp. No map leads you safely in. Because North Sentinel Island is the last place on Earth where time stood still. And the price of crossing its borders is death. At the center of this mystery is a people we know almost nothing about, the Sentinelese. They have lived on this island in complete isolation for over 60,000 years. No writing, no electricity, no metal tools, no warships, just huts, spears, fire, and a rhythm of life untouched by everything we call modern. And yet, in their silence, they have made the loudest statement of all. You do not belong here. When death is a door, not a wall. Most places kill you by accident, a storm, a virus, a reactor meltdown. But on North Sentinel, death is intentional. It is policy. In 2006, 2 fishermen drifted too close. They were killed. In 2018, a missionary attempted to convert them. He was killed. Helicopters sent to recover the bodies were met with a hail of arrows. To outsiders, this sounds cruel, barbaric, savage. But let's look at it another way. The Sentinelese don't know what a virus is, but they know what follows when strangers come. Disease, decay, erasure. And unlike the rest of us, who welcomed modernity with open arms and learned the cost too late, they say no, immediately, without apology, without compromise. They do not kill to conquer. They kill to preserve. Not territory, not ideology, but something much more fragile, their way of being. And that, perhaps, is the most radical act of resistance left on Earth. A different kind of work. In our world, we measure labor in hours, in income, in promotions. But what if survival itself is a full-time job? The Sentinelese wake with the sun. They fish, they build, they harvest. Every act of their day is purposeful, but never performative. There are no likes. No one selling productivity hacks. They do what needs to be done, and nothing more. In that sense, their lives are rich with something we lost long ago. Clarity. There is no overworking here, no burnout, no glass ceilings. There's only life and what it demands: food, shelter, connection, protection. And when that life is threatened by outside interference, they don't write petitions or call lawyers. They pick up their bows. Because for them, labor is not about profit. It's about protection. What they reflect about us. And now comes the uncomfortable part. We call them primitive. But what if we're the ones who've devolved? We work endlessly to build systems, global economies, sprawling cities, space programs. But in doing so, we've lost intimacy with the land, with each other, with ourselves. We build things faster, cheaper, stronger, and then wonder why we're always exhausted, always behind. The Sentinelese, in contrast, don't need more. They need enough. And they guard that enough with deadly precision. So the next time we laugh at a people who don't have smartphones, who can't name a single celebrity, who don't know what GDP means, we should ask ourselves, who really has the better balance between life and death? The ultimate boundary. In part 1, we asked what it means when work drifts too close to death. In Chernobyl, that line was crossed through tragedy. Here, on North Sentinel, the line is sacred, marked not by fences, but by intent. The Sentinelese don't run away from modernity. They keep it out. And in doing so, they survive. Not just as bodies, but as culture, as memory, as mystery. And maybe that's what scares us most. That someone out there still remembers what it means to live without us. That someone out there knows the value of life, so much so that they're willing to kill to protect it. Final thought. We often say that death is the end of life, but here, it's something else entirely. It's a guardian, a gatekeeper, a warning flare to the world. Not all progress is worth it. Not all visitors are welcome. Not all lives want saving. And sometimes, the most alive people on Earth are the ones who refuse to be found.
4. Empleby, Room 39, where work becomes blind devotion. We've walked through Chernobyl, where work quietly killed. We've sailed to North Sentinel, where death stood as a wall to protect life. But now, we enter a place where death doesn't come from mistakes or from sacred defense. It comes from obedience. A place where work is no longer duty, nor passion. It becomes ritual. It becomes a distorted faith. Welcome to Room 39. Key, a door without a name. No one outside truly knows what Room 39 is. It has no sign,
no listing, no official record. But we know it exists somewhere inside a government building in Pyongyang, North Korea. And it is believed to be the black heart of the regime's shadow economy. Room 39 is accused of counterfeiting US dollars, trafficking drugs, weapons, gemstones, and secretly funding the country's nuclear program. It is said to be the hidden lifeline of a government where loyalty isn't measured by words, but by the ability to serve in silence. Here, you don't work to earn a living, you work to worship power. And if you fail, not only do you lose your job, you disappear. Individual. When people become mechanisms. When was the last time you questioned your job, its meaning, its purpose? Inside Room 39, you don't have the right to ask. Here, labor is unconditional submission. Every action, typing a report, signing a document, moving cargo, isn't about progress. It doesn't serve the public. It exists solely to sustain the authority of the few. And in doing so, Room 39 becomes the perfect example of the most modern form of death, the death of the human will. Recycle, the loop with no exit. Each day in Room 39 is a repetition. You arrive, you bow, you obey. No questions, no choices, no room for error. Because mistakes here aren't just violations of policy, they are threats to your existence. There are no funerals for those who fall short, no condolences, just silence, an empty chair, a file erased. And still, people show up every day because they have no choice, because they've been taught that to serve is to exist. Configure, a cult without religion. If you think Room 39 is just a financial office, think again. It's a doctrine, a belief system where work is elevated to a dark form of worship. There is no God here, only the leader. No holidays, only quotas. And if you think this only exists in North Korea, take another look. How many of us live in our own personal Room 39s? Places where work consumes all our time, all our thoughts, all our spirit. Places where we dare not rest, dare not speak out, dare not dream beyond the job. We call it professionalism, but maybe it's just well-packaged surrender. Coffin, death without a sound. In Chernobyl, death came with an explosion. In North Sentinel, it came with an arrow. But in Room 39, death makes no sound. It comes slowly, through endless hours, silent nods, the absence of resistance. And the most chilling part? You still get paid. You are still alive, but you are no longer you. Final thought. In Part 1, we asked what happens when work crosses into death. Room 39 doesn't cross the line, it erases it. This is a place where death has already won, not by blood, but by control. And it reminds us, sometimes the scariest kind of death is the one you don't even notice happening.
Three places, three worlds that seem unrelated, yet are bound together by an invisible thread. The complex, often tragic relationship between human beings, labor, and survival. In Chernobyl, work was duty, responsibility, trust, until it became a pathway straight to death. On North Sentinel Island, Death was not a tragedy, it was a choice. A wall of flesh and willpower raised to keep out the consuming tide of modernity. And in room 39, work was no longer livelihood or purpose. It became a ritual, a dark faith, where people bowed not out of devotion, but because they no longer had the right to stand. We often think these places are distant, irrelevant. We tell ourselves they are anomalies, curiosities from history, international headlines, or forbidden zones. But if we look closer, each one reflects a hidden piece of the world we live in now. Chernobyl symbolizes the systems we put our faith in, only to discover their cracks too late. North Sentinel is one of the last voices in the world bold enough to say no to everything modern humanity praises as progress. And Room 39 is a chilling reminder that in some corners of society, people don't die from disease or disaster. They disappear slowly under the weight of silent obedience. We're often told to work hard to live, to strive for success. But at some point, every one of us must pause and ask, am I truly living, or am I simply surviving? Spinning inside a machine of fear, duty, and invisible expectations. How many of us have forgotten the joy we once felt when we first began our work? How many have traded health, emotion, and freedom just to hold on to a chair, a title, or the illusion of safety? 3 places, 3 faces of death. One from sacrifice ignored, one from self-preservation, and one from the slow fading of the self. They're not loud, they're not dramatic, but they are real, and closer to each of us than we like to admit. In the end, the question isn't, could you ever go to those places? It's, have you already been living there? Have you ever felt like a Chernobyl worker rushing into fire because the system told you to? Have you ever longed to be like the Sentinelese, to say no, to reject, to just be without explanation? Or have you found yourself trapped in a quiet room 39, where you function but no longer choose? If so, maybe it's time to look into that mirror and start asking yourself the real question. Is my work feeding me or slowly taking me apart? Because sometimes the most terrifying kind of death isn't the one that happens suddenly. It's the one that creeps in quietly through resignation, and you never even notice it's there. 3 places, 3 worlds that seem unrelated, yet are bound together by an invisible thread. The complex, often tragic relationship between human beings, labor, and survival. In Chernobyl, work was duty, responsibility, trust, until it became a pathway straight to death. On North Sentinel Island, death was not a tragedy, it was a choice, a wall of flesh and willpower raised to keep out the consuming tide of modernity. And in Room 39, work was no longer livelihood or purpose. It became a ritual, a dark faith, where people bowed not out of devotion, but because they no longer had the right to stand. We often think these places are distant, irrelevant. We tell ourselves they are anomalies, curiosities from history, international headlines, or forbidden zones. But if we look closer, each one reflects a hidden piece of the world we live in now. Chernobyl symbolizes the systems we put our faith in, only to discover their cracks too late. North Sentinel is one of the last voices in the world bold enough to say no to everything modern humanity praises as progress. And Room 39 is a chilling reminder that in some corners of society, people don't die from disease or disaster. They disappear slowly under the weight of silent obedience. We're often told to work hard to live, to strive for success. But at some point, every one of us must pause and ask, am I truly living, or am I simply surviving, spinning inside a machine of fear, duty, and invisible expectations? How many of us have forgotten the joy we once felt when we first began our work? How many have traded health, emotion, and freedom just to hold on to a chair, a title, or the illusion of safety? 3 places, 3 faces of death. One from sacrifice ignored, one from self-preservation, and one from the slow fading of the self. They're not loud, they're not dramatic, but they are real, and closer to each of us than we like to admit. In the end, the question isn't, could you ever go to those places? It's, have you already been living there? Have you ever felt like a Chernobyl worker rushing into fire because the system told you to? Have you ever longed to be like the Sentinelese, to say no, to reject, to just be without explanation? Or have you found yourself trapped in a quiet Room 39, where you function but no longer choose? If so, maybe it's time to look into that mirror and start asking yourself the real question. Is my work feeding me or slowly taking me apart? Because sometimes the most terrifying kind of death isn't the one that happens suddenly. It's the one that creeps in quietly through resignation, and you never even notice it's there.